Now, we are going where we have never gone. In the 5 years of the RedState Gathering, we're doing something we've never done. I was shocked and appalled. Had I realized this before today, I would not have invited him to speak. We're going, it is a first. For the first time, someone will appear on this stage to speak to you as an elected official who's younger than me by 12 days. Jim Bridenstine of Oklahoma is the ideal red state candidate. Jim Bridenstine, you know, red state, we believe in disruptive candidates. We believe that a third party is not viable. I was an elections lawyer for a number of years. I can tell you the parties have spent decades stacking the deck against third parties. Ballot access rules, campaign finance rules. It makes it very difficult. If you want a third party, the best way to do it is to build it within the Republican Party, challenging the establishment, beating them in primaries, and then getting yourself elected. Jim Bridenstine ran a campaign against a five-term member of the United States House of Representatives in a Republican district against a Republican, and he beat him in the primary and then got elected. Jim Bridenstine was in the military. He's actually from Ann Arbor, Michigan, and he's not a hippie. He made his way to Oklahoma, joined the Republican Party, picked off a Republican congressman in a primary, got himself elected in the only state whose claim to fame is all of the counties, all of them went for Mitt Romney over Barack Obama. And in fact, a Democrat actually came very close to beating Barack Obama in the Democratic primary in 2012 in Oakland. But there's a greater claim to fame for Jim Bridenstine. I have coined what I call the Republican Fight Club in Congress. These are 10 members of the United States House of Representatives. Keep in mind, you only need 18 Republicans to obstruct the Republicans in Congress, and we have 10 of them. Jim is one of them. He did two things that set him apart from every other member of the Republican House of Representatives, except 9 of them who joined with him. He voted against the rule to fund the continuing resolution in the last go-around, not just voting against the continuing resolution, but tried to bring it down from ever even getting to the floor of the House of Representatives. He also voted against John Boehner being Speaker of the House of Representatives. So he has the credibility, even though he's younger than me, to stand up on stage at the RedState Gathering. He is, hopefully, one day, a future senator from Oklahoma, maybe, but for now, the congressman from the 1st District of Oklahoma, Jim Bridenstine.
Well, thank you for that introduction, Eric. I got to tell you, Eric, you've been very helpful to me, writing nice articles about me when I take difficult stances, and I appreciate that. Real quick, can I see, is anybody here from Oklahoma? I know we've got one. We've got some others. Fantastic. I am proud to say that Oklahoma is the reddest state in the union. And we're getting redder and redder every day, and because of the great work of Red State, we're going to continue to get redder, and other conservative media outlets. I'd like to say, number one, I'd like to really thank Steve Scalise. We have somebody who is leading the Republican Study Committee, who is making our party go in a more conservative direction. And he is a leader. And I think all of us should be very grateful for his leadership in holding our leadership accountable in the House of Representatives and moving us in a more conservative direction. Can I get a round of applause for Steve Scalise? From the great state of Louisiana. I would also like to say that while I am from Oklahoma, I can also say that I've spent a lot of time in Louisiana. As a Navy pilot, I flew E-2 Hawkeyes, which is an aircraft with a big radar dish on top. And of course, I flew in Iraq and Afghanistan off an aircraft carrier called the USS Abraham Lincoln. Some of you may remember it from the Mission Accomplished banner that we put up. And I would say that that banner belonged to us. We cruised for 10 months. We fought in Afghanistan. We fought in Iraq. And guess what? We wanted to celebrate when we were coming home. And we put up a banner that said Mission Accomplished, and we celebrated. And you know what? I flew off the boat the day before the president came on board because the big wings, the E-2 Hawkeyes, had to get off because the press was coming on board. And I can tell you this, that mission accomplished banner was up long before any of us even knew that the president was coming. It was for us. We had done everything the president asked us to do. Every single one of us on that cruise came home alive. So I did fly the E-2 Hawkeye, and interestingly, as a reservist, there was a VAW-77 is the squadron that was stationed at Naval Air Station New Orleans, and what we did was counter-drug missions. So we would deploy down to El Salvador or Colombia, Curacao, other places in the Caribbean, and we would do counter-drug missions, and we were very successful. That squadron right here in New Orleans, we busted about $2 billion, with a B, $2 billion worth of cocaine every year on the high seas, and we were stationed right here in New Orleans. I will tell you that because the president is not committed to that mission, that squadron has been cut. It has been eliminated. And so $2 billion worth of cocaine is likely coming into the United States of America, and I can tell you this, the cocaine is flowing into our country faster than it ever has before. And I will say this too, the cartels that we fought down in Central and South America, they had one mission. It wasn't to get the drugs into the United States. It was to get the drugs to northern Mexico. Because they knew if they got the drugs to northern Mexico, they could put them in the backpack of a 16-year-old kid who would run it across the border because we have open borders. The only challenge is that 16-year-old kid would get shot down by another 16-year-old kid, because they wanted the $1 million worth of cocaine in that backpack. So our open border on the south side of the United States has created a drug war in northern Mexico where 90,000 people have been killed in the last 7 years. You think Syria is bad? We are on the brink of a failed state just south of the United States, and it's a result of our open border. So anybody who wants to talk about immigration reform, it starts with border security. So what I want to do is I want to really go down. Eric Erickson has been very helpful to me. Here's a guy who came from Macon, Georgia as a city councilor. He went to talk radio. Certainly he's been a contributor for CNN and Fox News and, of course, RedState. And now he really sets the agenda for the conservative movement in our country and in our nation's capital. And I can tell you that because of him and because of his efforts, our country is moving in a different direction. And he does shift the political landscape of conservatives in Washington, D.C. So I'd very much like to thank him. I would also like to thank Daniel Horowitz, who is a contributor to RedState. Daniel Horowitz is one of these guys. He has reached a balance between writing very incendiary articles and very scholarly articles, which is something that we need a little more of. And I can tell you he spent time in my office. He's talked to me about strategy, and I really appreciate him for doing that. So I'm going to go into some formal comments here, and then we'll do some questions. We all know that last week the president told us that we've recovered faster and gone farther than most other advanced nations in the world. I can't help but wonder which nations he's comparing us to. For the year 2012, the CIA fact book showed that our economy grew at 2.2%, which places us at number 128 in the world, behind China, behind Russia, behind Cuba, behind Mexico, but at least he had us tied with Egypt, the beacon of stability in the world. The only countries he could possibly be comparing us to are the Eurozone countries, which have been so ravaged by one fiscal and monetary policy after another. Well, they've just been devastated by these fiscal and monetary policies. By the way, these are the same fiscal and monetary policies that our president is giving us. So the advanced countries that he recognizes have economic woes worse than our own are the very countries he is seemingly attempting to model our economy after. Last week, the president told us that he had created 7.2 million new jobs in the last 40 months. He didn't cite a source He never does. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, that number is really 5.4 million new jobs. But absolute numbers like this don't give us the full picture. According to J. Bradford DeLong, this is a Berkeley economist, very liberal. In 2009, the number of American adults employed was 59%. Today, the number of American adults employed is still 59%. By contrast, that number was 63% in the middle of the last decade. It seems the president is picking and choosing which statistics he would like to share, which is not unlike how he picks and chooses which laws he wants to enforce. President Obama likes to point to the lower unemployment rate to showcase his economic success. The reality is, since the total number of adults employed in the United States of America is unchanged, the only way the unemployment rate can come down is if people leave the labor market. And we are at the lowest labor force participation rate in 34 years in this country. So when the president talks about his economic success, he's talking about driving people out of the labor force. This is something we haven't seen a president do before. And when he doesn't drive people out of the labor force, last month they said they created 195,000 new jobs. In reality, they created, let me rephrase this. They lost 240,000 full-time jobs, and they gained 360,000 part-time jobs. And this was in June, but this isn't just a trend from June. The president's economy has shifted workers from full-time to part-time jobs for years now. Usually our best periods of GDP and economic growth are after a recession, but this president has managed to squash the recovery. It seems Obama likes to claim success when he drives Americans into part-time work and others out of the labor force altogether. The question is, why is our economy stagnant? It's taxes, it's regulation, it's huge deficits, and it's Obamacare. I'm going to get back to the deficits in a second, but I just want to talk about Obamacare for a second. When you think about Obamacare, $500 billion in new taxes. Taxes on pharmaceuticals, taxes on medical devices. By the way, the medical device tax has already driven thousands of jobs out of our country. But it's also taxes on the sale of real estate and on capital gains and on payroll, things that have absolutely nothing to do with medical care whatsoever. 21 new taxes in all. So you've got $500 billion in new borrowing as well. So $1 trillion, but it's still not enough. So they robbed $716 billion from Medicare. You guys may remember that when Paul Ryan first passed his budget, I was a civilian back then, but when Paul Ryan passed his budget and he had a premium support plan, they made a commercial of him throwing Granny off the cliff. Do you guys remember this? Okay, so they made a commercial of Paul Ryan throwing Granny off the cliff, and at the same time, they were passing a piece of legislation that actually robbed $716 billion from Medicare. And the difference is this. Paul Ryan's plan didn't affect anybody at or near retirement. It didn't affect anybody currently retired. Their plan affects Medicare Advantage today. It affects Medicare Part A today, hospitals, nursing homes, skilled nursing facilities. And yet they're the ones that say that they're for Medicare, and we're the ones that are throwing Granny off the cliff. They have it absolutely, they are incredulous in what they will say and do to make their points. $500 billion in new borrowing, $500 billion in new taxes, $716 billion robbed from Medicare, and it's still not enough. So everybody in this room has to buy health insurance that perfectly conforms to what the president wants you to have. It used to be, in our country, that if you wanted to be responsible and save a little bit of money for yourself and build a little nest egg so you could have a high deductible, low premium policy because you wanted to save money on your premiums, that used to be okay in our country. A lot of people, including me, have had high deductible, maybe $2,000 deductible, low premium policies because it was a responsible thing for us to do for our families. That is now illegal in the United States of America. If you have that kind of health insurance policy, you're going to be taxed. If you don't, and what they say is if you don't have enough health insurance, you'll be taxed. Of course, it was a penalty until the Supreme Court ruled it was a tax. And because the IRS is enforcing it, and everybody in this room is going to have to, when you do your taxes on April 15th, you're going to have to prove to the IRS that you have the right type of health insurance, and if you don't, you're going to get taxed. When fully implemented, that tax is going to be 2.5% of your income. So let's just pretend for a second that you want a high deductible, low premium policy. Your tax is going to be, let's say you make $50,000 a year. Your tax is $1,250. That's what your tax is going to be. If you make $100,000 a year, your tax is $2,500 for that year. And guess what? If you have too much health insurance, well, that's illegal too. That's called a Cadillac plan. We can't have that. We can't have some people having more health insurance than others, so you're going to be taxed too. And guess what? So we got $500 billion in new borrowing, $500 billion in new taxes, $716 billion robbed from Medicare. Not enough. We're going to have this individual mandate, but it's still not enough, so we're going to have an employer mandate. Well, the employer mandate is what has driven people from full-time employment to part-time employment. The Obama administration has seen this in droves, and so they decided to delay the employer mandate without any legal authority to do that. So the employer mandate is now put on hold, but the individual mandate, well, guess what? We're gonna put on pause the employer mandate so we can give basically a bailout for multi-billion-dollar corporations, but the sole proprietor who's at home and maybe works as a plumber, he's going to have to comply with this law. It's not fair. It is critically unfair. And let's talk about how it's administered. So if you want to just pay the penalty, you can do that. And a lot of people will. And the reason is, if you make $50,000 a year, your penalty is going to be $1,250. The premium is going to be about $7,000. A guy like me, I'm 38 years old, I'm fairly healthy, I looked into it. My premium is going to be $7,000. Some people are saying it's now going to be $8,000. Premiums are spiking, by the way. So the question is, what am I going to do? $1,250? $7,000? $8,000? Most people are going to pay the penalty because it's a lot less expensive. But you know what? Under Obamacare, they can't exempt you for a pre-existing condition. So you can pay the penalty, wait until you get sick, go to the doctor, buy health insurance, get the care you need, and once you get healthy again, you can drop your health care. And this creates an adverse selection so that the only people who have health insurance are the people who need health insurance. And if you want to see health insurance premiums skyrocket, this is precisely how you would do it. So that's a summary of Obamacare, and I want to be clear. We absolutely need to use the CR to defund Obamacare. There are some in my party who will make excuses. They will say that, Obamacare is mostly mandatory spending and the CR is discretionary spending, so you can't unwind it with a CR. The reality is that is a false premise. The Hyde Amendment, which prevents Medicaid from funding abortions, there are big portions of that are on the mandatory side. And we use the Hyde Amendment every year in appropriation bills to stop the funding of abortions with a discretionary measure, an appropriation measure. So that is absolutely possible, and so it has been done. There is historical precedent for it. We can pass a CR, and we can do it. By the way, I am not one who wants to do a CR. I did not run for Congress telling people, yeah, you know what, we need to not do appropriation bills and we need to pass a continuing resolution. But some of us, like Ted Cruz and Mike Lee and Marco Rubio, we are absolutely willing to reluctantly pass a CR in order to stop this egregious law. Because what's going to happen is if we let it go into place, people are going to become addicted to it. It's like it's what Ronald Reagan used to call. He called it the constituency of dependency. Once you get all of these people dependent on Obamacare, and by the way, I'd like to say thank you to Governor Jindal for not expanding Medicaid under Obamacare. and not setting up the exchanges. But the idea is they're going to try to get everybody addicted to it. And I want to say this too. This is a winner for us. I think Steve Scalise perfectly summed it up. Democrats are writing me letters in Washington, D.C. saying, I'm a Democrat. Didn't vote for you. Not ever going to vote for you. But you have got to do something to get rid of Obamacare. There is bipartisan agreement on this. I see Eric is standing up, so I guess it's time for me to quit talking and start going to questions. Thank you.
You're so not a politician yet. Everyone else would just keep talking. You see, he hasn't succumbed to Washington yet. Everyone else would just keep talking. First question, ma'am.
With the CR, I'm a little confused.
The CR. Is that
continuing resolution.
Right.
Ted Cruz was talking yesterday about there's two parts. You could fund the government and not fund Obamacare. And you need 41 senators to do that. If they had 41 senators, would Reid even let the bill go to the Senate? Would he have to let the bill?
No, because it wouldn't pass cloture, so they could never have a vote on it. It would, in essence, be filibustered at that point. So
if they had the 41
yeah,
votes.
so you need 41 to block it from coming to the floor in the Senate.
What do you think the chances of the House not doing it that way? Passing the budget, but not passing funding?
Right, so the question is, if you look at the history of the House of Representatives, what you'll find is a history where we pass all kinds of bills to defund, dismantle, repeal Obamacare that mean absolutely nothing because it's messaging, and that is very weak, quite frankly. What you have to do is you have to tie it to must-pass legislation like a continuing resolution or a debt limit increase, and then force the Democrats to make a decision. Do we want to fund the government, or are the Democrats, and Obama is saying it, Obama is threatening a government shutdown. I think that is terribly irresponsible of the president to threaten a government shutdown.
Do you have the votes in the House?
Say that again?
Do you have the votes in the House to...
It depends on how active you get. That's what it's going to... I think we have 58 days.
Thank you for coming. My question, any thoughts on civil disobedience from the populace?
Well, sure. So there's certainly civil disobedience in American history has been very effective. Look at the civil rights. Certainly, I can tell you every day when I walk from the office building where I work to the Capitol of the United States, I see civil disobedience all the time. People out there protesting, talking about one thing or the other, and the issues are varying. So certainly there is room for protest, and of course that's what the First Amendment is all about. But of course we need to do it within the law. What I want to ask, there was a gentleman earlier who was running for Congress who asked oh, that's you. Okay. I was going to address. Well, the lights are bright. Okay, so I wanted to address your question. Did you have a different one, or?
I had a different one on immigration.
Okay.
First, I want to thank you for demanding that Obama apologize to the American people for all the time and money and effort that was spent on this farce known as global warming. I guess you haven't gotten an answer back or an apology from him on that. But that's not my question. My question on immigration is, our Constitution makes provisions for the states to protect themselves. It goes so far, if I understand it correctly, that a state can actually declare war on any invaders. Now, if I'm a state governor and I've got...
by the way, that is absolutely true. That is a constitutional principle.
Absolutely. And there's also a constitutional principle, Article 4, Section 4, that says that the United States government will come to the aid of the states in time of need. I just find it ironic that we have states such as Arizona and Texas that are passing laws to protect themselves, which they have every constitutional right to do, and the American people are being saddled with millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in legal costs for those states to defend themselves. My question is, how come I have not heard one congressman or one senator or one public official stand up and cite Article 4, Section 4, Article 1, Section 10, Paragraph 3, and even the article on immigration. The federal government doesn't have anything to do with immigration. It can naturalize people after the states invite them in for immigration, but I don't see anybody addressing that. Would you be willing to address those articles and those areas of the Constitution more strongly in the future?
Absolutely. Let me ask you, will you state your name into the microphone?
My name is Richard Lynch, and I'm running for Congress in the 10th District of North Carolina.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So what I will say is this, there's all kinds of different suggestions in the House of Representatives for immigration reform. And there's a couple of things that I could seemingly support. Now, one of them would be the idea that states be given the authority to enforce federal law. And if we can start there, again, it goes back to border security. For me personally, this is a very personal thing because I've been involved in the drug war for so long. And the immigration reform is not just about illegal immigrants. It's about border security for our national security, which is what you're talking about. The question, I think, the constitutional question is, when you talk about an invasion, how do you define the word invasion? And I would argue that maybe some people don't define what is happening as an invasion, but it's just lawlessness. Now, what I would say is that absolutely Congress should give the authority to the states to enforce federal law, and if we did that, then we would have governors like Rick Perry and Jan Brewer have the authority and the capability to actually enforce the law that President Obama doesn't enforce. And it goes back to the idea that he picks and chooses what he wants to enforce. And that's hugely problematic constitutionally. Real quick, before we go to the next one, I want to answer your other question earlier. You asked, what does how does the president get the constitutional authority for all of these, I guess, executive orders? Is that what it was?
That is correct.
And the answer is this. He gets that authority from the United States Congress. For dozens of years, we have been passing laws that give more and more power to the executive branch. Whether
it is time we stop that.
Absolutely. Yes.
Absolutely. And I hope somebody like yourself will stand with me to make that happen, because that is exactly what we need to do.
Yes,
Congress
sir.
has overstepped their authority. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
I think one of the refreshing aspects of these gatherings is that we hear candidly from people like you who are serving, and it's just unvarnished truth. And what frustrates many of us is that when we see the folks, the leadership and representation in Washington speaking, it's always filtered and manipulated. And what I want to know is, when are folks like you and Rubio and Lee and Cruz going to call those others out?
Well,
and just speak as plainly in Washington to them and not allow them to get into that pattern of deceit, really.
Right. What I would say is this. I think we're doing it right now on defunding Obamacare in the continuing resolution. I am not afraid to challenge leadership when it's time to challenge leadership. I cast my vote against Speaker Boehner. I voted against the debt limit increase. I voted against the debt limit increase. I voted against the continuing resolution. And certainly every time I make these votes, I do press releases and I try to sound the alarm as loud as I can. And I want to be real clear, because this is an important point to what you're saying. Am I short on time? Okay. So here's the important point to this. We have $1 trillion deficit in our country now going for 4 years. And the only way we can fund that is to sell bonds. And when we sell these bonds, nobody's buying them right now in the numbers. $1 trillion worth of bonds at 2% interest and $16, $17 trillion in debt. People don't trust that those bonds are going to be worth what they should be worth. And so we print money to buy the bonds to fund the government. We artificially drive the price of the bonds up, artificially keep interest rates low, and that somehow they believe stimulates the economy. And then when Ben Bernanke comes out and says he's going to stop the quantitative easing, someday in the future, maybe a year, maybe 2 years from now, when the unemployment rate is down to 6.5%, which, by the way, means that the labor force participation rate will have dropped. But once we get to that point, then he might one day consider raising the interest rate by not buying all these bonds with newly printed dollars. And you know what happened to the market that day? It crashed. Interest rates skyrocketed. Our economy right now is fake because of these $1 trillion deficits, which is why it is important for those of us and it goes beyond that. When you think about printing the money to buy the bonds, we weaken the U.S. dollar. We are losing capital investment in our country, and with that, we lose jobs. We lose economic growth. We lose people making returns on their investment. And the artificiality of the low interest rates There are people probably in this room who have worked their whole lives and been very responsible, and now you're in your retirement, you need to invest in something secure, and you can only get a 2% return on investment, and you can't retire. People are coming out of retirement, and this is the point that I think Republicans need to hit over and over again. These policies adversely affect the very people that President Obama says he wants to help. Seniors. It hurts the poor. Who spends the biggest part of their budget on food? The biggest part of their budget on gasoline, the biggest part of their budget on housing, the prices of which are all going up because of these policies where we print money to buy the bonds that fund the government. So the answer is, we have to have people that rise up and start speaking the truth that our economy right now is fragile, and this needs to be unwound.
Last question.
Thank you, Eric. A comment. We're talking civil disobedience. You say we have a few days and it depends on our activism. The lady in New York is very frustrated. We've had a tool presented to us here. Unfortunately, I didn't see many people at that breakout. Dr. Gray has a video, and it's about Obamacare, and it's very good as far as showing what it will do. It's very apolitical, but it's to the point. If you have community television in your area and you can sponsor a show, get his video and get it on community television. Okay. Other comment, question. I want to know, when we are getting these statistics about employment each month, and they say there were 165,000 or whatever jobs made, we are allowed, or the Congress is allowed, to have 128,000 legal immigrants come in every month. Do these figures, I want to see the figures on how many illegal immigrants we let in legally every month compared to what he's saying are these created jobs. Because where I work, I see lots of people coming in from China and India and displacing highly trained people at the university where I work.
I would be honored to look into that for you. When this is over, I'll come, I'll grab you, we'll exchange information. I don't know the answer to that, but I will absolutely look into it.
Thank you kindly.
You bet. Thank you so much.
Thank you.